entrepreneurs, if you've ever wondered what it's like to experience a major event like the Masters, the Olympics, the World Cup, Super Bowl, the Ryder Cup, we're talking to somebody today that's been not only to all those events, but he creates experiences for his customers. He's a professional host and event planner. Don Dow's been doing it for 28 years. In this conversation, we talked to him about how he knows an event was a success, what his standards of excellence are. We even get some of his personal and professional life philosophies. You'll look forward to hearing more about these great events from Don Dow.
Don, welcome to the Entrepreneurs United podcast. Like I said, before we got started, you're very excited to have this conversation. Heard a lot about you, heard a lot about Dow Events, and there's something about what you've done in the event space that is very intriguing. I'm sure will be intriguing to a lot of our listeners. As we get started here, can you please tell our audience a little bit more about Dow Events and what you guys do, how long you've been doing it?
So Dow Events, well, let's see, our tentpole event is the Masters. We just finished our 28th in a row. Typically what we do with our customers, whether it's at a major event, an incentive trip somewhere, executive leadership retreat. Generally in our world, when our customers land, we have them until we put them back on a plane, completely turnkey. So it's transportation and accommodations if we're at a major event, tickets, catering, we bring in chefs, the whole thing. And really it's been, a lot of fun. We've been a lot of places over the last, 25 plus years.
Everything I can't imagine.
Olympics worldwide, World Cups, auto racing, Bordeaux trips, Wimbledon, you name it, we've kind of been there. And I call my social media perpetuating the myth, because everybody's like, oh, you've got the greatest job in the world. It's just not even fair what you get to do and where you're hanging out. And so when I hear that, then I guess that I'm doing the right thing on the social media piece.
Yeah, that is awesome. I mean, basically what I see this as, right, to sum this up is, a VIP experience mostly catered towards organizations or companies who are either treating their key people or treating their employee or customers, I should say, or vendors to a once in a lifetime experience that you get to do multiple times a year. That isn't fair.
Well, that's about right. although I did kind of have a couple year hiatus where I was, kind of sitting here. I did a series of videos, which I craftily called my Corona Conversations. I'm not sure. I'm never going to watch them back because I have no idea what they really look like at this point. But I had to do something, right, to try to keep the ball in the air. But for about 2 years, all my customers completely lost my phone number.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I'd love to dive a little bit into that in terms of how you handle that as an entrepreneur and that adversity and how you're coming out of it.
Right. But
I have to ask just this pure curiosity question. You've done all these different experiences, 28 years at the Masters, Olympics, World Cups, Wimbledon, I'm sure a bunch of other things. What is the one that if you had to do all over again as a customer of yours, you would do, and why?
That's a tough one. I mean, I've been asked that question before, and the difficult thing for me is I'm really a boy of the moment, right? So if I'm in London at the Summer Games, that's just the best thing ever. Right. And then I'm in Augusta and I'm walking the first time customer out onto the course. And that kind of feels like the best thing ever. I think for me, it's more the moments. Right. And it's the feeling that you get. I haven't done it for a number of years now, but I used to go out on the 18th green as the tournament would finish in Augusta at the Masters. And I call that the tingle factor. Right. Just to get that little tingle that you get when it happens. Mm-hmm. And the last time I actually experienced that, we own a place across the street from Augusta National that we call the Championship Club. And when Tiger had come back and won, he was a quarter mile away, and I still got it was so loud. I still got the tingle standing out on my porch.
Yeah. I got the tingles watching it on TV, so I can't imagine.
So I guess overall, the Masters is it. It's like I said, it's been my tent pole. some of my closest friends who are CEOs or whatever have walked through my door in Augusta. And so doing the Masters since 1996 has really been a life-changing event for me personally, and really set the stage for Dow Events over the last almost 3 decades.
Yeah. So I know a lot of companies. I mean, Rich has a large organization he works with. I work with some, large organizations as well. You're always thinking about what's that thing you can do. Should we go to Montana and the ranch? Should we go here and, four wheel? What should we be doing? What do you feel that your customers get through one of these experiences in terms of, rewarding employees or customers or vendors? Like, what is that X factor?
I think the X factor really is, especially for the executives. Like I've got one executive. He's now the CEO of Subway, but he was at Cendant before that. Then he was chairman and CEO of Burger King, and then they sold it to 3G, and he kind of semi-retired for a few years, sits on a bunch of boards, and then he came back with Subway. But what he would tell you, and what he tells his executives, is just relax. Everything's handled. Focus your energy on our customers and on our guests. Whereas a lot of times, from my understanding, in other arenas or with other companies, people are still having to really figure things out and manage it and move their people around.
Yeah.
Whereas our team, really takes that over, completely. And so it's really a chance for those senior execs or those hosts to work, deeper on that relationship, as opposed to having to worry about what time is a van going to show up, or, where are we getting food, or what does that look like, right? And I think all the way through, whether it's Masters or for instance, right before COVID hit, for Herradura tequila, which is a Brown-Forman brand, and Brown-Forman has been a big customer of mine for 15 plus years. We took about 130 people down to Guadalajara, and then went to Casa Herradura, and then went to Puerto Vallarta for a couple days, after that. And the head of the brand came back to me afterwards and just said, that was perfect, because all we had to do was just host our guests, spend time with them, everything else. And, everything was completely looked after, even from taking over all the cabanas poolside and bringing in, bartenders. I mean, it's the little things that matter, right? And that's what I've learned over the years. And one of my favorite sayings is that, the easiest sale is a renewal. Just do it right the first time. And there's so many people in my industry that will make every promise in the world on the phone to try to get that customer to say yes. But that person who was on the phone selling it, there's no connection to the actual on the ground delivery. And so they end up with headaches all the time. Whereas, my name's on the letterhead. I'm responsible for all of it. My customers don't see anything I haven't physically seen myself, or experience that, anything that I'm not right in there with them. And that could be limiting in some ways, but, I've got customers with me, Masters, Super Bowl, wherever, that are 20 plus years. And, and those relationships, mean everything to me.
Don, can you give me some understanding of the scope of the business? What's the ballpark number on how many events per year run through your company?
It moves around a bit, but generally we're doing, I would say, like in 2023, we'll probably do 6 or 8 incentive type trips, whether that's taking, a brand to Sea Island, Georgia, or we're taking a couple different brands over in the fall here, actually coming up, one Labor Day weekend and one in October, over to Ireland and then to Scotland as well, right? So, and then I've got Wimbledon next summer or whatever, but it's kind of a blend. We're always at the Masters. We're generally at Super Bowl, especially now with Subway, who I also consult on their sponsorship piece of that, and so we manage that on the ground for them when we get there. Like I said, Wimbledon next year, for major events. And I think my guess is just what I'm seeing right now, will probably be 8 or 10 different incentive trips next year as well.
Okay. So just to clarify, you believe 8 or 10 incentive trips, and then you've got some of the bigger staples like the Masters, Super Bowl, and Wimbledon. So you're somewhere around,
and probably Kentucky Derby as well. Yeah.
Okay. So you're somewhere around what, 12, 15 events per year?
Yep.
Okay. And how many employees are part of the company?
Full time, just 2 others. And, at Masters, I write probably 50, 60 checks on Monday. But, and that's part of the uniqueness of that event. There's many people there. There's a few of them that have worked for me for more than 20 years. And they take vacation that week and come back to work. The Masters is a true celebration of that community, and everybody wants to be part of it. But I have clients that walk through the front door and they're hugging, employees, and they all follow each other on social media and everything else.
Hey, Don,
yeah.
Time out. Where do I apply?
Don, did you say you had a property at the Masters?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have other properties also, or just
no?
That one?
Just that one. The Masters is unique in that it's the same place every year. Now you can say the same thing about Kentucky Derby, but there isn't anything really close that would make any sense for that, right? But with the Masters having a place across the street where you've got a team of chefs cooking and doing all that, and you've got a transportation hub there, makes a lot of sense, because we stay like 15 minutes away in the neighborhood. That's where the Masters is so unique, in that it's the only event we do where everybody stays in houses, and that's been the tradition since the tournament started. And the simple answer to why is because there's not a lot of great hotels in Augusta, Georgia. And some people would argue that Augusta as a place to go is really only a destination 1 week out of the year, and the rest of the time maybe not so much. But I'm starting to kind of challenge that, because 10 years ago there wasn't a restaurant I wanted to go to in town, and now there's a bunch of really good things happening there, and they got a lot of growth, a lot of high tech coming in. It's really turning into a really cool spot. It's just 110 degrees right now, so I'm not going. Right.
How do you know an event was a success?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I'll know it wasn't a success because I'll get the feedback from my customers. I'm not removed, right? I'm right with them, so I'll have a feel for that. And the other piece too that most people don't really think about is that our drivers, and many of them have been with me for many years, they know they're just driving along in the van, right? But they hear everything. And so if somebody is not happy about something or whatever else, that is an immediate report back, right? And by the same token, they'll say, "Oh gosh, so and so is just over the moon. They can't believe that he's actually here and this is happening," or whatever. And that can be anywhere. So that's a little bit of our secret sauce early on. Is I've always had drivers, even if I'm hiring somebody in a different city, say, "Listen, I need the feedback. If you hear anything that you think that I should hear, I want to hear it as quickly as possible."
So one of the things is you have drivers in the van, because ultimately everybody needs transportation.
Yep.
Every group has to move somewhere to different activities over the course of the incentive trip. And the drivers in the van are specifically asked, "Hey, be listening for anything that we should know about the satisfaction or dissatisfaction of that customer." Do you have any formal feedback mechanism that you use at the end of
I don't, other than I talk to everybody, right? That's I'm a relationship sales guy. I've never had a professional sales class in my life, but I know these people, right? And I tend to know them pretty well by the time that we've worked with them for a while, and that's that's really my feedback, and the fact of, as they're walking out the door, they're like, "Okay, hey, give me a call in a few weeks. We got to start working on next year." And that happened more often than not, right?
So if you've got a new customer,
Yep.
a new location, what are the standards of excellence that you are looking for, whether it be in the vendor partners you use or in the optimization of the scheduling, or I can only imagine what they are, and I'm just kind of prompting you on what I
Right.
mean by the
So,
question. Like,
so
what are the standards of
yeah,
excellence with a new customer who doesn't know what they're asking for? You've
right.
never been to that city. What's the formula you follow?
The formula, well, first I'll spend a bunch of time talking with that customer and trying to understand just where their standards are at, how they look at things, right? But a lot of times I'll ask a very simple question and say, okay, tell me the best experience you've ever had. What did that look like? Right? And out of that, I can generally glean, okay, I get what they're doing. But like for instance, when we did the program for Herradura down in Guadalajara, the easy answer to that is you get on a plane, you go down there, and you go to everything. And we took them. We bought out a restaurant for our opening night in Guadalajara that was absolutely over the top, and they have the Casa down the road, and they had very specific relationships with restaurants in town that they'd always gone to. And so, my take on that is, yeah, I think I want to do something new, right? I want to, try to blow their doors off. This is a 150-year, celebration. It ended up being brand of the year. I mean, this was a big recognition, and so we took the lid off of it a little bit, and just so we look for that, right? Um, the first and last thing they see is transportation. It's always got to be perfect. If anything, I'm probably known a little bit as somebody that likes decent food and will find it for you, and definitely decent wine. And so, that's the other piece of it is you've got to find that. A hotel is a hotel is a hotel. I mean, if it's a 4 or 5 star hotel and that's what the customer wants, there's not a great deal of difference with all that, and honestly, they're not there that much anyway. So it's the experiential around it, and crafting some fun for them.
For our listeners who are going, wow, and by the way, I'm one of them who's going, wow, I would love to have Don plan an event for me. Sounds like he really cares after his customer. He puts on amazing events. I imagine there's some minimum job size that you're looking for. If I said, hey, John and I are looking to go out to dinner in 2 weeks, and we're looking for a great golf course, you might say, hey, here are a couple of places where you should go, but we're not going to be a customer of yours. That's not a big
Right.
enough job.
Right.
What is, to speak to me and to speak to our listeners, like, what is the size and scope, or what's a minimum dollar amount that to engage you, one of our listeners should say, boy, I got to be ready to drop ballpark X amount of money with X amount of people and X amount of days? Like, what can people expect if they wanted to engage you where they need to be?
Well, I'll give you an example of a program we did for an investment bank a few years back. They had just managed a sale of a company about $1 billion, and they wanted to entertain.
Wait a minute, $1 billion budget, Don?
No. But they'd managed the sale of a company but that'd be good. We could do that.
Right. You could do a great event for $1 billion.
Yeah. And so they came to me and said, okay, the chairman of the board, the CEO, and a couple of that company are huge wine guys. And they said, what can we do? And I said, well, do you want to stay in country? You want to go out? And they said, well, describe out. And I said, well, how about Bordeaux? We do all the first gross. We do, Saint Emilion. We do the whole thing. And they said, well, what does that look like? And it ended up being, we did a trip for 12 people, rolled into Bordeaux, stayed in this fabulous, it's now the Intercontinental, right across from the Opera House. And we rolled out, and I think in 3 days, we tasted, I think it was 56 different wines. I mean, it was, and it was, chateau lunches every day, amazing dinners every night. I mean, it was as you would expect, right? And it was really this investment bank's thank you to this company for letting us, do the merger, right? So, there's a dozen, right? People that went. What it really comes down to is just how far you want to go. We just finished the Kentucky Derby, and I had a real high end group there, but it was just 20 people, right? And it was everything from finish line suite to Barnstable Brown party to private bourbon tasting, and with my help from guys from Brown Forman and whatnot. I mean, it's just all those relationships that you encapsulate and create that experience and make those memories.
So I don't need to know what the exact tab was on the trip that you suggested, but I can imagine it's $5,000 or $10,000 per person.
Yeah, and that's kind of a typical number, to be honest with you. Masters has gotten to be, a couple days of the tournament is kind of that $10,000 number, all in, right? Not including airfare. Super Bowl recently, with the changes that they've made, can get stupid now.
Yeah.
Right? Depending on the ticket location. And, way back in the day, I was the first ever official licensee, myself and another company out of Chicago, for the NFL. And when they introduced the current program, I actually opted out. A good friend of mine had been running the Super Bowl for 20 plus years. He'd left, new management, and I just wasn't interested in earning a 7% commission on, and having my clients sign a contract with the NFL. So,
yep. So Don, I have some experiences in sports tours. Mine more related to youth sports. Mm-hmm. With a company that we did around a couple hundred youth sports teams a year, to and from Europe, North America, oh, wow, Asia, and really love that business. And what gave me the most joy was doing these experiences to Bolzano, Italy, or Prague, or Stockholm, or all these different destinations. And halfway through the trip, you're having a cocktail with one of your guests, and they're like, I just don't know how you guys do all this for what we're paying you. And it was the biggest compliment you could ever get. And I have to believe that's part of your magic recipe as well, right? Which is, it's not cheap, but you go to every little detail that's involved, from the transportation to the staff you have there, to the experiences they're having, that they probably look back and go, wow, that was a bargain. I got a lot more than I expected. Where do I sign up for next year? What are we doing next year? Right? Is that fair to say?
100%. And really, and everybody on my staff would tell you this too. My from day one has always been, if you spend $1 with me, you're going to get $1.10.
Yeah.
And that's just the way that we've always operated. And I'm definitely not the cheapest. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I'm not the most expensive either. And probably in fact, I was having a discussion with somebody the other day, and probably my biggest issue in terms of raising those prices is with when you've had a customer for 15 or 20 years, you end up kind of giving them most favored nation status, right?
Yeah.
But by the same token, whether we're doing an incentive program over here, we're doing the Super Bowl, we're doing the Masters, or whatever we're doing, they never question the invoice I sent.
Yeah. Well, that's the integrity of the relationship.
There's no pushback. It's all that relationship, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And, back to that, I mean, you certainly hear a lot, in sports, oh, that's a money grab or this or that. And, people could spend $100 and think it was the worst experience ever, and it was just right for a money grab, or they could spend 10 grand and have the best experience of their life and thought it was a bargain. So right. It's not about how much you pay, it's about the experience you get. And, the only thing I can think about through this conversation is you only live once. What are those experiences that are on your bucket list that you want to go get? And if you as an entrepreneur or your business can have the opportunity to provide your executives or vendors or customers with an experience like this, to your point, you can just sit back and just watch that relationship cement. Mm-hmm. In terms of, I had a experience, you asked earlier, like, what was one of your best experiences? So if I was one of your clients, I say, well, here's the experience I had. Please top this for me. It was with a customer. I went to visit a customer in LA, just me and the customer, and we went to Game 5 of the Anaheim Ducks Stanley Cup Final against Ottawa, and they won. And somehow, some way, shape, or form, different story, different day, I'm in the locker room with Timo Solani and a bunch of the Ducks, champagne drenched with the Stanley Cup that night. And I was like, I can't believe this is happening right now as a young hockey player growing up. But I could just imagine being on the green when Tiger Woods had that comeback, or being there, being
Right.
present, or some of these events you're talking about. The experiences I could share with others would be phenomenal. One question I have: how does Sarbanes-Oxley come in? Maybe that's not the right code, but how does that work for you in terms of bringing customers?
That's a code I know exceptionally well. So prior to the crash, 2007, 2008. I had no less than 8 investment banking clients. I had them all,
Yep.
right? Morgan Stanley, Nomura, Goldman Sachs, whatever. I had them all.
Yeah.
And the crash hits, Sarbanes-Oxley goes into effect, and they're all gone overnight. Poof, gone. Because now all of a sudden, they're only allowed to spend $50 on these people a year, right? They can't pay for their accommodations. They can't do this. They can't do that. And so, not only the investment banking firms, but I had a really big title insurance company back then that was spending almost $1 million a year with me across 3 or 4 events. So yeah, I mean, in some ways, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but in some ways, I had, prior to that, 9/11 hit, and I lost about $1.4 million in the snow, as I like to say, in Salt Lake, and spent 11 years paying it off. Right. And then you had the crash in the, just as I was really recovering from that, you have the crash in the middle of that, and you kind of start all over again. So when COVID hit, I kind of, well, I've done this before, right? Here we go.
Well, I do want to get to that. So hold that thought. I just want to come back to Sarbanes-Oxley for a second. So if I have a business that has, large scale corporations as a customer, as an example, and you mentioned Subway, so I'll just use Subway. Subway is a customer of mine, and I want to invite the executives at Subway to come to the Masters with me. Are they permitted to go?
Different companies have different rules internally, but also by industry. So from a franchisee standpoint, which would be the customers of a Subway, no problem. It's when you get into some of the investment banking groups, right? Think financial services mostly. They're the ones that are most affected by Sarbanes-Oxley, and that's very real. Starting to see a little bit of a trickle come back out of it. I've had a couple of groups in recent years come in, like there's a group here in Seattle that is a boutique within one of the big houses. I won't name them, and so what they do is they're a high net worth, private money management side. So what they've done is they've facilitated inviting their customers to come. But in doing so, the customers have paid me directly. Right. But then they're hosting. So, in that case, I'm putting them in a great house at the Masters and putting a chef with them and bringing in some, amazing wines that the company is paying for as host. Whereas the event themselves, they're really just giving them access.
Gotcha.
And being hosted by them. But the end result's the same with relationship building and retention and everything else.
Okay, great. So let's get to this other topic. I mean, holy moly, 9/11, the .com crash, 2008 recession, 2012 a little bit, 1920 COVID, 21 even COVID. You've been through these cycles. I mean, if I heard you correctly, that first one in 9/11 took you 11 years to pay off Salt Lake City Olympics because you had big investments there you weren't able to recoup. You've seen these cycles over and over and over and over again. Probably wasn't too phased with COVID, but on the same token, your business halts for 2 years. Talk to us a little bit as an entrepreneur, how you view these different cycles, how you've handled them, how you've gotten through them, any secret lessons there you've learned over the years?
It's probably more than I'm just stubborn, right? You see that helmet over my shoulder. I played, football in college and a little bit in the NFL. And my coach in college was a guy by the name of Don James, who, an amazing Hall of Fame sort of coach, and learned so much from him. But really, it comes to an attitude and that I've just had for a long time, that there's no rearview mirror. I'm an old offensive lineman. I'm going forward, and that's the only direction I know. And with COVID, it was much different in that all the music stopped, right? Even after 9/11 or the crash, in 2007, 2008, there was still commerce happening.
Yeah.
Right. So I could still go out and sell against that, and keep the music going. Right.
Yep.
With COVID, it all just stopped. And I've got people under contract, right, for instance, to go to the Masters. So literally, I rolled those contracts over for Augusta for 2 years. So I've been spending a great deal of 2022 just trying to clear stuff off my books. I should have just gotten back from Wimbledon like 3 days ago, but because they were still doing the testing requirement, those customers wanted to roll it for another year. So I've got to continue to carry that, right?
Yeah.
And it gets a little tricky because now all of a sudden you're carrying something for 3 years. You've had that money. I got that money 3 years ago, right? But the cost may be up 25 or 30% by the time we get there.
Yeah.
So then I've got to go back and have, a semi difficult conversation and say, okay, well, if you really want to do this, you're going to have to send me X more.
Yeah.
Or you're going to have to cut the size of your program.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I mean, certainly with inflation the way it is right now. And
And so that's been a real, and I've got a couple of those with these fall incentive programs I'm doing. And actually one of them, literally, we were 10 days out last August when Omicron popped up big and they canceled the trip. So I literally flew down there. We were subject to 100% cancellation. Went down there, brought one of the execs in. We were able to salvage, a good portion of it. But now we're going back down and doing it this year. Again, just trying to, some of it's just trying to get these things off the books so we can get to, new and fresh, right?
yeah. Well, it's the unfortunate part is carrying deferred revenue on your balance sheet, right? Just sitting there and you're like, I got to get rid of this.
Right.
But I can assume based on this conversation, although you have had or will have difficult conversations regarding price increases and changes, this always comes back to the relationship part of things again.
100%.
And having those tight relationships in tough times, how critical those are.
Oh,
right?
yeah, no. And even to the point where, as I was coming out of Salt Lake, for instance, a couple of my longtime customers would say, hey, know it's tough for you right now. Why don't I just prepay all the Masters in the summer for next year? Type of a thing. And those relationships are gold and still are, right?
Yeah.
So very fortunate that way. With folks, but
okay.
And like what I did with COVID, I literally, I saw it and I said, okay, great. And so I cut everything to the bone, right? If there was a forbearance program, I took it. I literally just set everything aside that I could to make sure that I could get to the other side and then square it up then, right? So I went through the 2 rounds of PPP, right?
Yep.
Which helped. It wasn't huge because the way I pay myself isn't big W-2, right?
Sure.
But did that. SBA came out with what was called like an EIDL loan. Yep. I took advantage of some of that. Okay, so I don't have to, it's 30-year terms. You don't have to pay anything for 3 years. Fine, I'm in, right?
Yep.
And so just really took those steps to try to get to the other side, which we've done, and then took care of all that stuff that that I pushed off, and back at it. But for me, it was about getting to the other side and staying positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, that comes back to that, just that perseverance, that attitude as an entrepreneur, right? That, hey, got to move forward, got to move forward.
Got
It's
to.
pretty daunting to look at the Salt Lake City going, this is going to take me a while to pay off. I got to move forward. Let's go. Even more daunting when your entire business comes to a screeching halt and there's nothing you can do.
Right.
It's very paralyzing. You said you recorded some Corona conversations. Were those similar to what we're doing here? Just some podcast conversations with prior customers of yours?
Actually, it was just me.
Okay.
Right, sitting right here, and just like a minute and a half or 2 minutes of thoughts.
Okay.
Right, really just trying, and it's kind of back to some of that Coach James and everything else. Keep going, stay positive. Look for the places you can have impact.
Yeah, good for you.
I wasn't being whiny or anything like that.
Sure. I'm sure you weren't. So Rich, I'm just thinking here that, there's a couple things that as cause I'm now daydreaming about what I'm going to go do with Dow Events here. If there was one thing that you've seen on TV, heard about, experience, whether it be wine tasting or a sporting event or one thing, and you had to just pick one right now that you had to select for you and a group of people to go with, what would it be to put you on the spot?
It would most likely be a culinary wine sort of thing
for you, Don. Okay.
Yeah.
Rich.
I would go with and it may be a challenge to Don, although he may say, yeah, I do one of those a year. I do like an African safari 5-star style.
Wow.
That's actually something that's on my list.
Wow.
And I'm I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but it's something I'd like to do probably in the next 5 years. I've got a blended family coming up. I'm actually getting I guess I'm saying it now. I'm getting married again in December.
Oh, hey, congratulations!
Thank you. And so I've got 3 kids. There's a couple of kids over on the other side. Now there's spouses and everything else, and I've always wanted to do that safari thing on a personal basis. And so I think it would be fun if I could get everybody to that spot to do that.
Well, hold on a second, Don. Are you changing your answer?
What's that?
I want to be the first to volunteer. John and I will be your test subjects. You won't have to pay us anything. We'll take the trip for free, and we'll let you know just how good of a time it was.
You guys can do the site inspection.
Exactly. We'll do a site survey.
John, I got to come full circle and ask you the same question.
Yeah, a bunch of friends of mine and I have talked a lot about the Derby. And I'd really love to do that. And I'd love to do the Masters as well. But the one that comes to mind as one that I think would just be that once in a lifetime experience, I probably wouldn't repeat twice, is the Monte Carlo Grand Prix. Have you done that one, Don?
I've done it for clients. I've got some great relationships in London. And there are people that I trust implicitly. So I've generally put somebody over there with them. And I have not done it myself. I've been to Monte Carlo. What a cool spot, right? Just that whole coast.
Yeah.
And I could, and again, here you go, right? Boy, the moment. Oh yeah, that's the one.
Don, I'm curious about any unique life experiences that you've had that brought you to a career of creating joy for others.
If you look at it a little bit different, I get the joy part, but for me, I think it's been experiential from the time I was a kid. There was a gal I dated in high school whose parents, in fact, I'm still close with the father. The mother had passed on, and he's in his mid 80s, and it's always, he's always got a custom suit on, and he's got great wine and everything else. He was a big banker in Seattle, and I used to bartend when I was like 15 or 16 their Christmas parties. And then they would have a summer party every year. Well, guess what? Guess who has a Christmas party every year? And guess who has a summer party every year now?
Yeah.
Right. And because my parents weren't, big in entertaining, they didn't drink, they didn't do any of that. So literally from an early time, I saw that and was meeting people. I ended up, when I was doing the Goodwill games in Seattle, there was a guy I used to pour drinks to who all of a sudden I'm, in business after school, and the guy's the city attorney of Seattle. I mean, it's, people I met, right? Or the chairman of the bank, I sold him a sponsorship to the 1984 Final Four. And I didn't know I wasn't supposed to call him up and just go see him, right? Because I was, just starting. So I think for me, it's that experiential piece. It kind of started there. I was lucky enough to play in 4 bowl games in college, a couple Rose Bowls, Sun Bowl, and Aloha Bowl. And so I started seeing that event. I didn't know it, but I was seeing that event operations piece with the transportation and the woohoo at the airport and just how people were treated, right? And then came out of school, was drafted, cut, went to the 49ers, blew a disc in my back, and then went to work for my agent and started on the 84 Final Four and put some of those things into practice that I didn't really understand that I knew, right? So, I mean, I know it's kind of a roundabout sort of answer, but I think it was just exposure to certain things and recognizing it. And to this day, for me, it's a real feel. I can walk into like that restaurant in Guadalajara, and in 2 minutes, I was like, we're buying this thing out. This is it. Well, we got 2 more appointments. We're done. We're going right here. Right. It's, it's know it and see it. But by the same token, I can walk into a place and I'm not 5 steps through the door and I'm turning around and walking out because I know it's not going to work. It's not going to have the right feel.
So ever since a young age, you were hosting. You were a host when you were pouring drinks at those Christmas parties and the summer parties, and you saw the joy you could create for others and yourself in treating people exceptionally well, is what I heard in that story.
And and I think that's accurate, but I've never thought about it that way. But yes, and even to this day, I'm lucky enough. I've got a couple of friends with a 58-foot yacht. We go to Husky games and tie up behind the stadium. We call it sailgating, right? But I'm in charge of food and beverage, right? I do the whole thing. And former players come on and friends and I'll have guests come in or whatever else, but yeah, still hosting.
That's great. I want to get, if you'll allow me to, slightly personal with you, but it's to understand what makes you tick better and some of the life and business philosophies that you guide yourself by. And the access point that I'd like to use, if you'll allow me to, is you said you're getting married coming up in December. And again, congratulations.
Thank you.
You have 3 kids. You have a few more kids coming that you'll be a step parent to.
Yeah.
Can you outline for us what are some of the life philosophies that if I were a stepchild coming into your family, and you were going to have a sit down with me and you were going to go, well, let me tell you a little bit about how it works around here in my world and some of the expectations that I have of how we're going to work as a family.
See, now that would be an interesting one because I'm not that sit down guy. What I am more is, and even my I guess you'd call her assistant and event director and creative and everything else. She would tell you that I've never sat down and trained her. Where she really gets it is she's on the other side of the wall and she can hear me talking. And when I'm done with that conversation or we'll be on Teams and she's asking me questions as we're going along, right? But it's more keep up. Right. And understand, what I'm doing. But it's funny when you say that because as you're saying that, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to sit down and have that conversation. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with these kids already. My youngest daughter graduated from college in December, and one of my fiance's sons is living in Whitefish, and so my daughter said, well, can we just go to Whitefish, for my celebration? And absolutely. So we put everybody in a condo and went out and, had a bang up time and just, spent time together and everything else. And so, I think if anything, I probably will stay away from politics and all the groups, as best I can. And, but it's really just finding, I think, that those individual traits for everybody, and again, being a host for that.
It would only seem natural that you would bring those relationships together through experiences. That is what you're the best in the world at doing, right?
There you go. I mean, No,
Don, I've gathered a couple philosophies from you. You said keep up. I heard you say that you didn't whine, so not whining is a philosophy you live by.
Right.
There's no rear view mirror was a quote I wrote down. That's something you live by. I heard you describe how you took advantage of opportunities, specifically financially, when you could. So instead of envisioning it as a sit down conversation, and let me tell you how it works, what are some additional things that these couple of kids who are going to be part of your family will come to learn about you?
I think they'll learn that I'm pretty transparent. I'm definitely tactical. I'm accused of making 3 decisions and taking steps in that direction before other people make one. Or, I know you're used to making decisions, but sometimes other people should have a voice. That would be something. That would be me. But the other piece that goes to that is my old offensive line coach, and I was actually with him a few nights ago. They were in town because our athletic director was celebrating his 100th birthday from the University of Washington. But when I was early on at UW playing football, he said to me once, and it's always stuck with me, and I've told everybody, it's part of the Dow Events mantra, which is make your mistakes full speed, right? Because as an offensive lineman, if you twitch, it's 5 yards. If you twitch and then pound the guy into the turf and laugh at him, it's still 5 yards, right? If you jump off sides. So, and I guess the other thing too is that the worst thing that the drivers or one of my team can do or whatever else, if a customer asks something, is, well, let me ask. I got to call Don, or that drives me crazy. So what I try to do with everybody on my team is empower them to say, if somebody asks you a question, you've been around me long enough, you've seen how we operate, put yourself in my head and give them an answer. And if it ends up being the wrong answer, I still got your back. But I want to give an answer. I want to keep going. And that's the way I've run my company and my life.
That's great. So don't ask for permission. Go make your mistakes at full speed. Go be decisive. And as a matter of fact, you said you move so fast, or sometimes that some people may say, hey, be more inclusive in the decision making, but you're going, for goodness sakes, at least a decision was made. And we're going to learn from it, and I'll include you next time.
Right. And if I'm wrong, I'll admit it. Right. I mean, I guess that's the other thing for me too, is that I've learned enough early on in my career that if you don't, and really once I put my name on the letterhead, it rests with me. Right. So if something's not right, I'll look them right in the eye and say, oh, I'm sorry. And I'll get this corrected and I'll make it right away. And that doesn't happen very often, but when it does, you got to step up and own it.
Great place to end. I feel like we got a few quotable quotes there, and I have some things to reflect on about how you live your life that I'd like to adopt in mine. Thanks so much for being a great guest of ours today, Don.
Oh, you bet. Thanks for having me. It's an honor, and look forward to seeing you guys in Augusta or at the Derby, or maybe on that safari at some point.
Can't wait. Thank you.
All right. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode.
Rich, one of the best definitions I've ever heard of success is the formula that when you can be the best in the world at something, you're the most passionate about what you do, and it can drive your economic engine, that's when you've found success and where you should be. And there's no doubt in my mind that Don found it early, stayed with it, and is still in his lane of where he can really do what he truly loves doing. I'm sure it's not always fun and games, and I'm sure there's a lot of chaotic times where he has to jump through hoops to make things happen for his clients, but very, a lot of admiration for what he does, maybe is the right way to put it, because this would be a role that I would love to do myself and have so much fun doing. And think about the experiences after a lifetime of doing these that you have in your repertoire?
And it starts from childhood typically. And I was so happy to hear him go there. And I don't really want to ask, hey, tell me about some childhood experiences. But it's like, what formed you to want to do what you're doing? And to hear that as a child, he was a host at parties. And that led into a passion of a life continuing to be a host. I found it to be, frankly, kind of fun that he had never really thought of it like that. I feel like maybe our conversation connected a dot for him on kind of how he has the passion he does for what he does.
Yeah, no doubt. And if you move beyond the glitz and glamour of the events that he's actually taking clients to, behind that is a real business. I mean, 5 years after he started his business, had a catastrophic event in 9/11 when the Olympics get canceled. And I'm sure this happened to a lot of people around the Olympics, possibly. But he probably had all these different events, and he's sitting here 5 years into his business going, oh my gosh, how am I going to get out of this thing? Right. But his attitude, maybe his stubbornness that he would say, right, to just, you know what, I'm just going to keep moving forward. There's no rear view mirror. And let me figure this out. Rich, it took him 11 years to pay that off. If you do the math on that, that's 2012 by the time that the issue of 9/11 canceling the Olympics caused on his business. And to be able to persevere through that and keep moving and keep creating events and creating these type of relationships, really at the root of entrepreneurism, there's no entrepreneur who's going to have a business 10, 20 years, 30 years and not go through one or two catastrophic events that they just have to get through. That's what entrepreneurism is all about, is that perseverance when those catastrophic events happen, getting through them.
Yeah, and he sure has lessons of doing that when he had brought up the 3 or 4 dips in the business that came about. I thought it was fun in the standards of excellence that I asked him about, like, how do you know that you've done a great event? One of the things he said that was kind of fun to hear was he identified transportation as the first and last thing the client sees.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because if you know the law of primacy and the law of recency, those are the things that are most memorable. The law of primacy is the first thing that happens may be most memorable. The law of recency is the last thing that happens may be most memorable. So can you imagine you paid lots of money to have a 5-star trip, 5 out of 5 or 6 out of 5, to go with Don, and the transportation vehicle smells, or it's late, or the person isn't courteous who picks you up, it would set the tone for the rest of the entire event. Or can you imagine the same thing on the drive to the airport? That you'd be like, everything was great, but man, the last thing I remember is he really didn't have his act together on that drive to the airport. We almost missed the plane. Do you remember? And then that becomes the story. So I think that is so brilliant on his part to have a major focus on the first and last thing that's experienced.
I love the fact you highlighted that. Although he mentioned it and I heard it, I didn't necessarily relate it to the primacy recency law. Is that what you called it?
Yeah. Yep.
Love that, right? Because a lot of us entrepreneurs run small events, small meetings, small whatever. How you start and how you finish may leave the tone for what people experience in that moment. So really good key learning you just extracted there for me. So thank you for doing that. I think the other thing that he seeks out in his events, and he knows when it's a great event, when this happens for sure, is when he feels that tingly feeling, that tingle factor. And, certainly I'm sure we all have had tingle factors. Sometimes is when things aren't so good, but when you get the tingly factor that something really good is happening and you're seeing it, you're witnessing it, you're a part of it, you're involved in it, there's no better feeling in the world. And under the premise of you only live once, how many tingle factors can you get every year, right? By potentially having these types of experiences. Now, not everybody can do these types of experiences. Your company may not be able to afford it. You may not be there yet or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the Olympics or the World Cup or whatever. You can go create experiences with your team that, to your point, start well, end well, and does something that they've never done before that you do together. And the bonding relationships you could build with your own team, let alone customers and vendors, is so powerful. And I know you guys do a lot of that at your company. it's just so important to do, to get out of the office and build those relationships that, through hell or high water, you got your teammates with you, that you've had these different, relationships through experience.
Well, it goes back to a formula that you and I discussed 25 years ago, which is the best relationships that you have are the highest number of experiences plus the highest variety of experiences. And what Don offers his clients is a major variety, particularly in 5-star experiences, to get to know each other out of the office and outside of sitting in front of a big desk. Last thing I want to highlight is I think we could all take a lesson from Don's example here, where he says the easiest sale is a renewal. Just do it right the first time. There are very few products and services that the entrepreneurs who I believe you work with and I work with that are not renewable products or services. Like, you could use it more than once. It's not a once in a lifetime buy. And if you do it right the first time, those people are going to come back, and you don't have to worry about marketing. You don't have to worry about selling. And he said he's never been in a sales class in his life. He's a relationship guy, and the easiest sale is a renewal. When I asked him, do you have something formal on how you figure out if it was a success or not? No, I talk to all my people. I have a relationship with them. I ask them how it went. I have my drivers listen in. Like, it's so organic what he does, where he really, you get the feeling he takes the customer in his hand and cares for them through the course of the event.
Yeah, I love that, Rich. And the other part too that I love about his leadership style, it was towards the end of our conversation, is not only does he retain the people he's been working with for many, many years, but they get to know about Don the person. They get to know about Don the business person. They get to know about Don the leader of the company, and the types of decisions Don would make, to the point where he tells his people, look, make a decision. You know enough about the goals of what we're trying to do, or how we're trying to please our clients, the experiences we're trying to give. Don't say, hold on a second, I got to call my boss. Take care of it. Make a decision, make the right decision. But even if you don't make the right decision, just know that I got your back, and we'll talk about it afterwards and figure out what we will do next time. But just make the decision. I just love that about his leadership style. And you can tell how his customers just have incredible experiences through that mechanism.